But I mean, yeah, it's a good idea, and I'll look into it. Kurt shared some information with me, and
If I can go back to the question, Mr. Chair, that Supervisor Gibbs asked, kind of building on the question of how much work before we kind of get input from the county board. My sense is that the county board's going to want some sense of what the operational plan or issues might look like, so I think it would behoove us. I can work with staff. We can come back with at least, again, a high level, hey, these are the things we need to be on our radar, potential challenges before we get the kind of approval from the board. I know there was an update given at your last board meeting, just at least letting the full board know that this was a discussion. So I think that's sufficient at this point. And I think we can plan on, I will endeavor to have some information for your meeting in July. If I can't get that information to a point where I think it's valuable for this committee, I'll confer with you, Mr. Chair. But again,
Why don't we target the second meeting in July for that? I think we've got a pretty full agenda for that first meeting, and that would give us a chance for you to develop that a little bit more robustly and have the discussions with the courts and others. Okay. Anything else from a benefit perspective? Also, as part of that Tim Brown presentation, he pointed out that private sector pay is generally 15.6%. Private sector pay is 15.6% higher than local governments are paying. So if we're going to be competitive, we need to look at the flexibility around the hours and other benefits. We have in the past talked about child care and the provision of child care as an employer. This committee doesn't have jurisdiction over the broader community, but in light of some of the action not to continue the child care credits and incentives with the budget, I imagine that there will be additional pressures on having providers available and the affordability of it. Is there an opportunity, and we have talked sort of conceptually about the potential use of the North Central campus as a place. When will we be in a position to have a more robust discussion of what the options are to us as an employer in terms of our ability to recruit and retain members that have children and are in need of child care?
Well, the easiest way to answer that is, I guess, if you tell us you want us to look at it, apart from what we've been discussing from a facility perspective, we can come up with some options. And I think I shared this with you just in conversations that I've had with other local employers. I mean, employers are doing a variety of things, ranging from kind of current state, which is we have a dependent care deduction that you can sign up for, which is a nice benefit. I utilized that when my children were in care, all the way up to individual businesses offering childcare stipends. And then, of course, you have those businesses that are working to sponsor or hold slots, childcare slots, as they're referred to within various childcare entities. I haven't, I don't know if you have, looked into, Molly, whether or not kind of what that might look like and what our cost structure has been. From a facilities perspective, we've been just trying to interface with a local provider to get a sense as to what facility modifications would need to be undertaken at our Lakeview campus to allow for an on-site child care center to be operated by someone else. And we're not far along in that process either. That's a short answer of we'd have to bring you more info. We'd have to do some investigatory work to bring you information. But if that's something you're interested in, we can try to do that. Again, timeliness is going to be the issue. Molly and her team are exceedingly busy with our Workday implementation. You just got an update on health insurance, kind of how that renewal process or RFP process is going to go. So I don't want to set you up with false expectations that, hey, we can have that information next month with a whole slew of options and costs associated with them. But that's kind of my perspective. I don't know, Molly, if you have anything else you want to share. No. Happy to hear it. I mean, if you do hear in the community of innovative approaches, like Molly said, a lot of this is operational, that we don't need your formal approval until, of course, we need to pay for things. That happens through the budget. We can give you the costs for those. But it's been really insightful for me to just interface with other local employers to see some of the things they're doing from a benefit perspective, whether it's related to health care benefits, flexibility issues, really anything.
Kurt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's critical that we actually look at whatever options are available, because there's obviously, a shortage of child care provider slots out there in the community. We know, from the reports that have been given to the EEDC committee, the amount of shortage in child care providers. If we want to actually be an attractive employer, having those options for our employees, I think is going to be critical. Especially in light of what, like I said, what we heard just an hour ago, and that was that the private sector is paying 15% greater than the public sector, 15.5% greater. So we have to look at every opportunity there is to be competitively and be competitively placed to be able to be the preferred provider or preferred employer. So I would. And I totally recognize the fact that the HR department is fully overworked and clearly underpaid for the amount of work that they're going through trying to implement Workday. But I think it's imperative, if we want to be competitive in the community moving forward, that we're going to have some kind of advantage, and child care is obviously one option.
Other thoughts? I'm seeing nods. Yes. Is this worth continued evaluation of what our options are without, obviously we're at the option development stage, not at the implementation stage. Other thoughts? Why don't you go back? You're going to be coming back to us in the near future relative to the work week. If you could, I think what we would need is an understanding of what this might take in a timeline and realistic expectations. So at that second meeting in July, could we be in a position to maybe talk about what process we might use to develop those, what the timeline might be, what the variables might be in there, and then have the discussion about how we proceed? Is there consensus to move in that direction? I'm seeing nods, yes. Everybody's nodding yes, so why don't we move in that direction?
Sure, we can do that, and I'll interface with Molly again. My primary concern is just one of capacity. Sure. But we'll talk and we'll confer with you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other policies, benefits for recruitment, retention of staff? Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? If not, we will move on to the approval of the May claims and question cost. And Gail asked and did receive them in an Excel spreadsheet format, and I found that I think in the future, if we can just share that with the committee, it's easier to look at. I don't think that was shared with, and I just realized it wasn't shared with everyone. Supervisor Marshall had made that request and Christie had honored it. We will send that out to everyone in the future versus the the format, reporting format, if we could do that.
After I figured out how to make it work, yeah, I'm awesome either way, so.
So, but you all received the old format. What are your wishes relative to the claims and question costs? Supervisor Marshall. Supervisor Marshall moved to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Zhang. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, we're going to jump down to 7A, and we'll take up shared revenues. And I think I'll try to lead that discussion. Supervisor Lemmer had some very good questions relative to some of the memos that we had received. For many of you who were in attendance earlier today at the governor's signing of the of Assembly Bill 245, which dealt with funding for local governments. It's the policy side of the state budget. This year, the legislature is moving the policy parameters through separate legislation, and then the funding through the state budget. As part of that, there was a consequential change in how shared revenue payments will be funded in the future. 1% of the sales tax is set aside for basically payments to local governments. That money will be allocated using the existing shared revenue formula, plus every municipality and community, county will receive a $50,000 payment. And there's $50 million that was set up to go to counties. That's based upon a formula of current aid per capita and a number of other factors. Marathon County currently receives $29 per capita, and these numbers are from $28 per capita from Dale Knapp from Forward Analytics. The statewide average is about $20 per capita in aid, and there were some provisions put into the formula basically saying we'll take 150% of the maximum per capita to make sure everybody gets something as part of the increase. Milwaukee County was treated differently. They received 10% increase of the 50 million, and then and the extenuating circumstances is that they were getting the sales tax and a number of other changes. When all is said and done, Marathon County is looking at about a 35% increase, 34.9%. We are, of the non-Milwaukee counties, the lowest percentage increase in the state. One of the reasons is that $50,000 per county boosted some of them up significantly. Some counties like Waukesha County were receiving very little money. Oneida County was, according to Dale Knapp, receiving about $1.90. $1.90. And there were, big variances between the counties, and they wanted to try to make sure that there was a sharing of that across states. So some of the richer counties, like Waukesha County, that didn't fare well under the old formula, were treated differently and received a much higher percentage. But our dollar amount was still significant for the county. Once the Fiscal Bureau in May issued a paper that was modified by the legislature. Finally, they put an additional $18 million in. We would have received a 23% increase under the initial proposal. That $18 million was meant to boost the payment to some of the communities, such as Marathon County, that didn't fare as well, therefore taking us up to that 34.9%. But there were a number of factors that went into that. Dale Knapp was consulted by the Legislative Fiscal Bureau and others in the development of that formula because of his understanding of finances for counties and and others, and given his role with the Taxpayers Alliance and now with Forward Analytics. There are still a number of issues that need to be resolved relative to that timing of the payments, the amount of the payments. The payments right now are scheduled to be made in state fiscal year 2024-25, which means we wouldn't see any money until July of next year at the earliest. Dale wasn't aware of the proposed distribution plan, so we'll have to factor that into the discussions. There's also a phase out of certain personal property in that bill, but there's a hold harmless provision taken out of that 1% sales tax to make sure that counties are held harmless. So there are, we won't lose the revenue associated with the property taxation of personal property, but most of the personal property will move off the local property tax rolls, with the exception of there are provisions for, there's developers that own land and then chain stores come in and lease the land and build their buildings. Those will be subject to, that personal property will be subject to local property taxes. There are some other nuances in there. And the Legislative Fiscal Bureau is going to be issuing a updated paper, I believe this week, explaining some of that, and I would imagine that there will be clarification that will occur throughout the next couple of months, and we'll have a better understanding. But we won't see that money until apparently fiscal year 2024, according to Dale's interpretation and the way it's worded. That, again, that could change with because the legislature is not done with the budget. Wisconsin Counties Association also put out a information on Monday of this week relative to the budget. It was a good week last week. There was a 2% per year increase in general transportation aids. There's the local road improvement program, shovel ready program with $100 million. We benefited from that in the past with county projects. There are increases in income maintenance, many of the other child support payments and others that are positive, but at the end of the day, we'll factor all those into the development of the budget going forward. Kurt, is there anything that you want to add?
I guess no, I was going to say the only thing, I think one of the things that was historic in the shared revenue, and you can take just Adams County for example, and look at what Adams County received in aid in the past. $18,606 was their total aid to Adams County. Now their population's roughly 21,000, so they were getting less than $1 per person. Marathon County was receiving $28 per person. So there was always winners and losers under the old formula, and what they're trying to do, or what the legislature made great steps in moving forward, was trying to make that system so that there wasn't winners and losers in the long run moving forward. I think putting that 20% of the current sales tax and allocating that 20% or 1 cent of the 5 to state aid to municipalities, and tying that to, as the increase in state sales tax increases, and not specific to any one jurisdiction or any one area, whatever the state rate of sales tax increase is what each municipality will get as a percentage increase moving forward. So for example, if Milwaukee happens to have a 20% increase in sales tax, but the statewide average of sales tax increases is 5%, all municipalities will get 5%, and there won't be, again, creating a winner and loser, tying it to the success of the state. And I think that's critical. If we want to look at success, everybody wants success, and economic success is now at the heart of the state aid formula. So I applaud all of the legislature for the work that they've done. Again, there's still things that needs to be worked out, still needs to be funded through the budget, and but taking great steps moving forward. We hadn't seen an increase in almost 20 years in state aid.
And Marathon County's increase is $1,353,437. So it's a significant increase. And again, we haven't seen any increase in 20 years. And so we still have, on top of the 5.2 million we'll receive in shared revenue, in aidable revenues, we'll still have the utility payment on top of that. So it will be, because Weston 3, 4, 5 are here. So it will make the budget a little bit easier this year or next year, depending upon how that rolls out in the payment schedule. Any questions? All right. Do you want to give the update then on the Forensic Science Center?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a whole lot of new information to share. We gave you the good news. Chair McEwen gave the good news previously. The state omnibus motion through the Joint Committee on Finance did provide $7 million toward the project. Just again, for context, the last costing that we had for that project was approximately $14.8 million with a healthy contingency built in. So the board previously approved staff moving forward with conceptual and moving to a schematic design for that project. So we have engaged the architect. They're well along in that process. So we should be dialing in our overall cost. But what we've done in the meantime is we've held a couple of team meetings as staff just to really kind of try to understand what the omnibus motion provided, and we reached out to Wisconsin Counties Association. There is some language within that omnibus motion that gave us a little bit of pause. Specifically, it talks about the other portion of that overall project cost, essentially the $7.8 million estimate, coming from non-state revenues. So initially we had really decided to try to take a broad spectrum approach to seeking out all funds, including state ARPA funds. That language gave us a little bit of pause as to whether or not we would be able to do that. So we're still working with WCA and going to confer with the legislators on that. But apart from that, we really sat down and tried to identify what local funds are already pledged to the project. Of course, the county has pledged $2 million. We have an application in through the federal government, through Senator Baldwin's office, for some congressionally directed spending. And in speaking with Wisconsin Counties Association last week, they were, I guess, as confident, I'll say this, as confident as one can be when you're making a funding request from the federal government, that the project, one, was well understood, and two, valued. So we're certainly waiting on that. But then also looking at all the opportunities in partnership with the technical college. Our initial conversations with the technical college indicated that we would need to purchase that land for the, if we were to site it at the technical college campus, they would need to sell us the portion of property for that facility to be constructed, and we're working out what that transaction is going to look like. However, the technical college has been a very strong potential partner with us, in indicating that they would consider that an opportunity for local match up to the full cost of that land transaction. So that affords us some opportunities. Similarly, we're looking through all of our current equipment we have within the facility through our medical examiner's office. Just for example, we, as part of our pandemic response for mass casualty preparedness, we did procure a large cooler that could also be utilized as a freezer. It's a very nice piece of equipment. It can be moved to the new facility and serve a purpose. So we're trying to go through all of our existing equipment and saying what can be repurposed and be considered local match to essentially narrow that gap between what the initial estimate is for the construction of that piece of property and or the construction of that facility, and kind of where we are. We also held just last week, at the end of last week, we reached out to some a representative of with strong ties to a local foundation, just to try to get the lay of the land in terms of what that process looks like in terms of capital fundraising campaigns, successful ones. Had a very positive meeting, and we're going to confer with that individual again. So that's kind of where we are right now. I would say that we are also breaking out, trying to prioritize what that capital fundraising might look like in terms of, what's most potentially viewed as advantageous from the perspective of those foundations. I will say, if you look at this from a very narrow government context, and Chair McEwen of the task force and our medical examiner, Jess Bolanek, explained this at the county board, if we were to just build kind of the core county government functions, this facility would look a lot different, and it would be much more inexpensive. It would still be expensive. It's just much less expensive. All of the add-ons that really address a lot of the kind of foundational or existential challenges within this area, the lack of the lack of forensic pathologists. That's a nationwide problem, not a Wausau or Marathon County problem. Our facility is designed in a way that we actually hope to have a positive impact on that through partnerships with the medical college, NTC, and the local UW. However, to do that, we need teaching spaces and other things that, again, elevate the cost. So we're thinking we have some strong partnerships that will be able to bring in those dollars. But that's the only update I have right now. If anyone has any questions, happy to try to elaborate. Or if anyone knows anyone who's really interested in making a contribution to the project, we don't quite know where you would write the check yet, but we're working on securing a fiscal agent for purposes of capital fundraising.
Do we have naming rights?
You do have, the county board does have a naming policy that was approved by the board, I believe, in 2018 or 19.
Any questions? All right, we will then move back to item 6A3. And someone would, if we desire to go into closed session, someone would need to read the motion, and then we will take a roll call vote, if that's the case. Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session. Roll call vote suggested pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. To wit, review of appraisals for and discuss the strategy regarding the potential purchase of private property adjacent to the county-owned properties.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Robinson,
Aye.
Leahy,
Aye.
Gibbs,
Aye.
Marshall,
Aye.
Hart,
Aye.
Lemmer,
Aye.
and Sean.
Aye.
All right, then motion carries. We are in closed session. We will, Molly, you're welcome to leave us unless you feel compelled. Christie, I think that's an option.